communists take their country over. They're going to tax their people at 90%. Way to go. This is what you paid for, though. This is what your defense of European sovereignty paid for. Communism. And this is the dividing line. It's coming down to the dividing line. Now we're getting down to it. We're going to find out who everybody is.
You abandon the people in Ukraine.
The people of Ukraine have to determine
for what's right. But did you abandon those people?
The people of
France
Ukraine.
came and hated
Yes.
and helped us,
Yes.
so we can have a
Yes.
revolution. Shouldn't we be helping them so they can withstand the truth?
Not at the expense of America.
It doesn't have to be at the expense.
It is at the expense of America. No, it's at the expense of America right now.
And where's the money going?
What? And this is.
They're just handing it cash straight over to Zelensky, and then
Yes.
they're buying boats and mansions and everything else. They're not saving their own people.
Listen. I understand it. I get it. This is the common thought of our foreign policy, which is also why being America first is so dangerous. It's considered so dangerous to the world order. You cannot defend everybody else's borders more than your own. And they can say that you can do both. But show me the evidence. Show me the evidence that you can do both. Show me the evidence that both borders can be defended adequately. And we have to define what adequate defense of our border is and what it means and what do borders even mean. And let's go back to this. Let's go before the American Revolution. That seems a little too recent, a little too personal, a little bit too close to us. Let's go to the fall of the Roman Empire. Why did Rome fall?
Because they decided to pay to defend their borders rather than defend it themselves.
That's right. They became a reverse vassal empire. And that's exactly what we've become. We pay to be the bodyguard. We pay to be the protection. We pay to defend everybody else. We pay them, like we're doing in Ukraine. They're not paying us. We're paying them.
The Ukrainian people are fighting and dying.
We are paying
They are
them.
actually fighting.
But my point,
I mean,
that's not addressing my
You
point.
said billions of dollars and.
But wait a second. That's not addressing the point. The point is that we are paying.
Fighting and dying.
And that's the emotion they always want to draw you on. You're fighting and dying. We're fighting and dying. We're fighting and dying right here in America. Our citizens are fighting and dying in the streets. When your border's wide open and fentanyl drug addicts are flooding across it and raping men and women and children, them people are dying.
You can control the borders again.
You cannot
and you can give everyone that's not
you cannot survive.
Tell them to freak out.
You cannot survive as a reverse vassal state. That's the bottom line. You cannot pay to be everybody else's bodyguard. No, in vassal empires, when the Roman Empire was strong, they paid the Roman Empire for defense. And if the Ukrainians want to kick in and they want to pay their weight, then they can get a fair deal. And we can trade. But we will not go around and defend any country without conditions under the premise that the United States dollar is going to be a military tool wielded against countries. And that's what we've done. And that's the great lie here. To use the United States dollar as a military tool. Here, take our money, take our dollar, take our reserve currency. And what is the biggest export in America? Does anybody know? The United States dollar. The United States dollar is America's greatest export, and they wield that power. That's why everybody talks about the destabilization of currency as being a real issue of national security. Kissinger, Brzezinski, all of these Atlanticists, intellectuals, sold your generation that the way to avert war is to have entangled markets, to have economies that are interdependent. Anybody familiar with that? Yeah, that was what you were told. We won't have war. We got global markets. Everybody's interests are intertwined. Did that work? No. That didn't work for you. Russia has different ideas. China has different ideas now. They don't want to play your game. They don't want the United States dollar to be the global economic hegemon. They've said it clearly. They've drawn their line. Now you get to decide whether you live in the fairy tale that they'll come back under the fold of the United States dollar, or are you gonna wake up and save your country before you die? And I don't mean you individually, and I don't even mean your sons and daughters. I mean the idea of America dies on a Ukrainian battlefield. And isn't it prudent that when you've stretched yourself too far and too thin that you come home and regroup? Or do you just play it all the way out till the end? It's like a guy who's drinking and he doesn't know when to stop. He doesn't know he's on his way to alcohol poisoning and crashing his car because he's too young. No, it's not even that he doesn't care. He's too young and stupid to know. Seriously. And none of you are, I'm not saying that you all are young. Not saying you're old either. I'm not saying you're old either, but you're not young. You're not 20. Not very many 20-year-olds in here. But we're a young nation. And if we don't call back on that Roman history and understand that when you defend too many outposts, it's the recipe to let the hordes come across your border back at home. This was the fall and the decline of the Roman Empire. Stretched too thin. And by the time that the hordes showed up, the Germanic tribes and the hordes showed up at the door of Rome, there was nobody left to defend it. Look at your Secret Service.
Yeah.
You say we can defend both. We can't even defend the United States president because we've trained and educated our people that DEI and Marxism is more important than the truth. And you're putting women in harm's way for some strange equality agenda who can't even get their gun out of their holster when the president's life's in danger. And you're telling me we can go defeat the Russians? Now let me tell you a little bit of history about the Russians. All of your sanitized American, I'm not a Russian apologist. We have clear differences between us and Russia. Differences that we should acknowledge. But let's be honest. You didn't win World War II. Stop letting your history teachers tell you you won World War II. That is a lie. You helped win World War II. You aided World War II, and really you aided the British, and you aided Europe. The Russians gave 20 million soldiers for us to fight off the Nazi war machine. 20 million Russians died. Only 500,000 American troops died in World War II to fight off the Germans. Do they ever tell you that stat when they talk about World War II? No, they don't, because after World War II, the post-democratic liberal order became the prevailing ideology, and it was very anti-Russian. And who are you fighting on behalf of? I'm just gonna take you all the way there. Because, I'm just a 33-year-old militant black kid who's an extremist and tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, but you can go read all this in your history books, your mainstream history books. 1905, Halford John Mackinder, British academic and intellectual, is commissioned by the Crown to write a report on the state of the world, and he writes the geographical pivot of history. Geographical pivot of history says that the Eurasian world island will determine the power of the future. This was the birth of globalism, right there in the British Empire, right there in your British academic institutions. And he said that where you can walk to will determine the power, the control of the Eurasian world island. He said, he who controls Eastern Europe controls the heartland. He who controls the heartland controls the domination of the Eurasian world island that holds 50% of the world's natural resources. Halford John Mackinder. You know where the other half of the world's resources are? Right here. So what does it do us any harm for whoever is on that side of the planet to dominate and control the world's natural resources? Right there, we should have known it wasn't our national interest. It's not our national interest. You're defending the Europeans. You're defending the Commonwealth. You're defending the Crown. That's right. Always have been carrying water for the British. And they tell you you're European. They tell you you're an Atlanticist. America's not an Atlantic power, it's an Indo-Pacific power. The war we fought, the war we won in World War II was the war with the Japanese. That's why Guam is what it is today. That's why the Southeast Asia is what it is today. You're an Indo-Pacific power, you're not an Atlantic power. But they tell you all because you share language, and you share history, that you're duty bound to defend these people. Which one of them will show up to defend you? Which one of them are sending their money or their troops? Show me the European nation that's offering to send its National Guard or its troops to defend your border. To defend your border from there in Texas. Is Zelensky? Is France? Is Germany? Any of the other Baltic countries? Who's offering to send their resources and their soldiers and their sons and daughters to make sure that fentanyl isn't coming across into your communities? None of them. So there's no equal partnership between us and these people, and they've showed you. You're like the guy who doesn't get it yet. Dating you know what I mean? You're like the guy who hasn't caught on yet. Or the girl, same thing, happens both ways in relationships. You're like the guy who doesn't realize you're being taken advantage of, and you're getting strung along. And you're just paying for dates at this point. You don't even know what you're doing anymore. You're not getting married, you're not having kids, you're not going anywhere committed. You're just a fluffer on the deal. Seriously, you're the patsy in the thing. The whole thing is held up by you. The entire deal is held up by you and the American working class people. Working class American citizens hold together the fabric of the entire globalist agenda, and they laugh at you.
So what are you saying? You want NATO troops down in Texas?
What I'm saying is I want to pull out of NATO. Let the Ukrainians and the Europeans determine their own future. Let them fight to determine their own future. It's not as easy to get. Look, just like it wouldn't be easy to come and occupy this country, if the spirit of freedom is really in the hearts of human beings, it's very hard to oppress them. But when you subsidize a war on both fronts, like we're doing in Russia, like we're doing in Ukraine, like we're doing there in Israel, we'll talk about that next. Because I already know what you must think about the Israel deal. And I guess if I have any questions about that whatsoever, I'm anti-Semitic. Okay, well, let's talk about it then. You don't even know where your money's going. Let's put it into perspective. Because this exponential math sci out there running on you is profound. $1 trillion just sounds like another couple of bucks to us now, right? You put a one-digit number in front of the word trillion in the newspaper, and all of a sudden people think, oh, yeah, hey, not a big deal. That's right. All right, Chan? We got a mathematician here from MIT. Crazy what they've done with exponential math, isn't it? Just another 2 trillion. $1 million stacked up in $100 bills is as tall as this table chair. $1 million, $100 bills. Tall as a table chair. $1 billion, $100 bills. Tall as the tallest building on the planet. $1 trillion in $100 bills stacked on top of one another is as tall as the United States Space Station. $2 trillion of inventory gets up and walks out the back of the Department of Defense, and not anybody will see a day in court about it.
2.3 trillion, September 10th.
Oh, that was another 2 trillion that went missing. Yeah.
Has been there, $2.3 trillion done. Donald Rumsfeld couldn't account for it.
That's right, yeah. Remember that 2 trillion, Donald Rumsfeld? Everybody remember that? They're stealing your money. They're just taking it from you. It's all on your back. And they tell you, oh, feel good about yourself because at least we're keeping the Ukrainians free from Putin's rule. But we didn't want to let Putin into NATO. When the Russians came with their hands out on their knees, saying, would you please let us in NATO? We just want to play along. Let us do a joint missile defense system with you. All of your Western political leaders said no. You think they said no on behalf of the Ukrainians? The Ukrainians are cannon fodder If your leaders really cared about the Ukrainians, they would strike a peace accord. They won't even come to the table and talk about peace. Why? Because they make good off of the war. They love your money. They love your money. Every time there's a war, you give your money. They love you. That's why they don't like peace. And while we're on the topic, that's why they don't want peace there in the Middle East. The Muslims are coming. The Muslims are coming. When Donald Trump was in office, the Muslim leaders were lining up to strike an Abraham Accord. They were going to isolate out Iran. They were going to isolate out the Palestinians. They were going to isolate out the Qataris. They couldn't wait to sign the Abraham Accords. As soon as Joe Biden gets in, the whole deal is quashed. They love war in those places because it gives them a justification to steal your money. And then they talk to you about abortion and racism and police brutality and LGBTQ on the news. And I have a problem with all of those issues. But let's get down to the root. Let's get down to the root of why the Star Tribune likes Joe Frazier and not Royce White. Because I know how the money works. And I won't talk about anything else as long as that scam's running. And they know that. That's why my campaign launched at the Federal Reserve, and Joe Frazier works at the Fed. You do realize that Wells Fargo is a sitting member on the board of the Federal Reserve, right? You do realize that the Federal Reserve is not a government institution. It's made up of a group of the leading banks and financial institutions in this country.
In this country? Worldwide.
It's a cooperation.
Not in this country, you're right, I'm
It's
sorry.
a slavery institution.
Worldwide.
There you
It's a
go.
slavery institution.
But this is the difference. And when I said, I try to play nice, but easy to get me going.
No, sometimes you need to.
But this is the difference. This is what the referendum is right here. War, money, sovereignty, border, debt, forever wars. Close the border, pay the debt, stop getting involved in forever wars. These are issues these are things we can deal with right now today. Right now, on day one, Donald Trump can close the border. Right there, we can make the executive order policy that demands that we're starting to go in a direction where we become an equity economy and not a debt economy. Manufacturing. You can't play empire if you don't make anything. And that's another thing. Everybody's so gung-ho to go to war with feckless leaders. I don't want to go to war with Joe Biden at the helm. It was so wild for me to see how many Republicans, how many Sean Hannitys of the world were willing to go to war with another nuclear-armed country with Joe Biden as the commander-in-chief. Even on principle, if we want to go to war with the Russians, we better wait until Joe Biden's no longer sitting on the throne, right? You think? Or do I need to remind you how we left Afghanistan? Or do I need to go back and talk about Afghanistan and the Middle East while we're on it? And I shouldn't even do that, because they tell me there's certain things you can't even say in front of Republican crowds. And what I tell them in response is, those are the very things I have to say. Because if I don't say those things, then we can't even go forward. I know I'm supposed to win the primary. I know that's supposed to be the goal. You got to win the election. You got to lie to people if you want to win. That's become the common ethic in America. Lie to people. Let's go back down history. Let's go back down memory lane.
Oh, my head.
Raise your hand in here if you know the term mujahideen. Oh, good. A few people know mujahideen. If you don't, the mujahideen is the tribe there in Afghanistan, or that area, that became the Taliban. Okay? Anybody know who was the first American president to welcome the mujahideen into the Oval Office? What? Stop. One at a time, please. Wait, don't you dare say it. Who said it?
Reagan.
Right here.
Patty? Yes. Yes and yes.
I was gonna say yes.
Ronald Reagan.
Pictures are online.
Ronald Reagan was the first president to let the mujahideen into the Oval Office. And guess what? I like Ronald Reagan. Smooth guy, charismatic, articulate, did a lot of good things. Let the dark prince of intelligence right there next to him, didn't he? And maybe, how many people in here voted for George Bush? It's okay, just raise your hand. Okay, good. It's good. Listen, listen, senior. Okay, listen, every nationalist is a reform globalist. People change, politics evolve, understanding evolves. Okay? Not knocking. Reagan was a smart, intelligent, charismatic guy. Somehow under his leadership, George Bush rose to the height of power there in the intelligence community. And you're living with that mistake today. You're living with the mistake of a Bush-run military-industrial complex and intelligence community to this very day. And before Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton even got out of the blocks to try and disrupt or dislike a Donald Trump, his first opposition was George Bush and the Bush junta. George Bush rise to power. So maybe some of the things that happened under Reagan were George Bush is doing. Maybe some of the things he forced Reagan to do. Maybe Ronald Reagan was scared of George Bush Sr. He'd be right to be. Ronald Reagan had all of the people who were alive at that time lived with the memory of watching JFK get his head blown off. So it wasn't like the fear didn't already exist. I'll give you another example. Let's keep on down this thread if we can. Anybody know the name Edwin Meese? Yeah, Attorney General Edwin Meese was the Attorney General under Ronald Reagan, and he defended Ronald Reagan during the Iran-Contra scandal, where we were running guns and drugs and money in a trade to fight communism, right? More or less, fight communism. Anybody know who Edwin Meese's chief of staff was? You better not raise your hand. Anybody know who Edwin Meese's chief of staff was? That would be Mark Levin.
Oh.
Oh, the great one.
Yeah, the great one.
Yeah, the great Mark Levin. Mr. Iran-Contra. Mr. Military Industrial Complex. Mr. Cover the Tracks. Mr. Make It Normal. And then come to all of you and tell you how many guns and drugs are in black communities. And this is why black people haven't come into the Republican Party. Because they know that history. Because the Democrats were smart enough to siphon that Mark Levin history down and put that cultural memory in black people like me. And they don't tell the other side. They don't tell the other side that the Donald Trumps and the populists and the Tea Party have been fighting that apparatus this entire time. They don't know that history because nobody's going in to tell them. And now I go in to tell them, and you want me to also tell them that we should send money to fight a Nazi country? Fight for a Nazi country? I'm supposed to go into Minneapolis and say that? Do you think Joe Frazier is going to be able to swing one single vote in CD4 or CD5 telling those people in those communities that they should give their money to fight a war in Ukraine?
No.
They couldn't even point Ukraine out on a map. And I'm not one of these people saying black people don't know what computers are. But I am going to say they are a little geographically challenged on the globe. Some people in here could point out what Ukraine is, maybe. I mean, it's okay. I get it. When issues go to global, people lose sight of it. That's the point of globalism. When your governance gets too far away from you, you can't see it anymore, so you can't hold it accountable. Okay, next question. I'm sorry.